on this episode of Tell Us a Story.
I was literally on an island with no way to get off. I was in Australia. There was no planes flying. We couldn't leave our region. Everything was chaos.
Could you sort of just define for anyone who may not understand what emotional intelligence is and what you mean when you say it? Those interactions are important and they exist throughout our entire lives. How is it that Emotions Untapped came to be?
And I kind of got to the point where I was, sitting in the studio one day and I was like, is this all? There were some big career moves. There were some mental health issues. There were a lot of things that suddenly came to the surface. And she had said, you're depressed and have anxiety. And that was never something I thought I would ever hear in my life. And I finally made it home back to Canada. And I was home at my family's camp on the lake where I grew up.
Welcome to Tell Us a Story, the podcast by Belmont City Press, where entrepreneurs and sales professionals share their journeys, insights, and strategies for success. In each episode, our guests reveal how they've overcome challenges, established their brands, and leveraged their stories to promote their businesses so you can too. I'm Red Hilton, your host for this episode. Today I'm joined by Livia Lowder, who is the founder of Emotions Untapped, the podcast. So, Livia, tell us the story.
Thank you so much for having me, Red. At Emotions Untapped, we help leaders and millennials to understand and elevate their emotional intelligence with the specific purpose of having the tools and knowledge to not only overcome any challenge they face, but also to support others around them in improving their EQ. Our ideal client is anyone passionate and committed to understanding themselves better, being a leader in their personal and professional lives, and also being a good example and mentor to children in their lives, because we're very passionate about elevating that next generation as well. And also those that are looking to feel more connected to their higher self, be healthier in their mind and their body, and feel more balanced and regulated when it comes to their emotions, so they may ultimately have a more fulfilling life and be a more powerful leader and mentor. You can discover more about us through our podcast platform and on our Instagram page, Emotions Untapped, and we can be easily reached through the link in my bio. So be sure to reach out so that we can help you get started on becoming a more emotionally aware and self-regulated individual.
That's fabulous. Can you do me a favor, just right off the top? Could you sort of just define for anyone who may not understand what emotional intelligence is and what you mean when you say it?
Of course. So the, factual definition of emotional intelligence is the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of the people around you. Emotional intelligence is quite a large umbrella. There are different elements inside of that. And the first and foremost is, self-awareness. Self-regulation, of course, kind of comes next. And depending who you talk to, there can be some different pillars. We can look at motivation, decision-making, empathy, and those are the ones that I like to focus on. So it really comes down to, being in tune and understanding your emotional body, your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and being able to have the understanding and ability to manage those. And essentially, if you kind of go that one extra step, have the awareness and understanding of others' emotions and thoughts and feelings, and then be able to, just have a really good level of communication and understanding when it comes to human interactions.
Those interactions are important and they exist throughout our entire lives.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. So sort of bring us to where you are. How is it that Emotions Untapped came to be? Sort of what is your story that kind of necessitated it and brought it to the forefront?
Yes, I love this question. It is quite a story. It's been quite a journey. And it all kind of started in 2015 when I was just really kind of unhappy with where I was at in life. I went to school, I followed through on my college diploma. It was radio broadcasting, actually. I followed through on a career in that industry, and I kind of got to the point where I was, sitting in the studio one day and I was like, is this all my life is going to be? Like, is this all that it is? And I had this desire to explore and to adventure and to go out in the world and see things. I'm from a very small town, and it was always a desire of mine to go and travel. So 2015, I decided I'm going to go on an adventure to Australia. I'm going to sell everything I've got, pack what I've got left in a bag, and, head off on a journey. And I really only thought that that was going to be a year backpacking adventure. And it actually turned into 8.5 years of living down under. A couple of months into my journey, I met a fella, and we ended up in a long-term, 5.5, 6 year relationship. And it led me to pursuing my um, permanent residency in Australia, which eventually led to my citizenship. So we were together for, like I said, 5.5, 6 years. We traveled the country. We had this amazing experience together. We were on this, complete journey, and it was so much fun at the time, and it was so fantastic. Um, Fast forward to 2019, we had worked, we had saved up a bit of money, we wanted to buy a house. We found a house, we bought a house, we were settling down, and I kind of had this realization of, oh, okay, well, maybe this is my life now. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be, and this is who I'm supposed to be with. And it was, seemingly very loving relationship at the time. Fast forward a year or two from that, and COVID happened. There were some major transitions in that relationship. There were some big career moves. There were some mental health issues. There were a lot of things that suddenly came to the surface. And through that experience, I kind of started to realize and understand that, hey, actually, this relationship maybe isn't so loving and supportive as I thought it was. And at post relationship, like, it wasn't something I realized during the relationship, but post relationship, I came to understand that this person was actually had a lot of narcissistic tendencies, and the relationship ended very dramatically, very tumultuously. Um, there was infidelity, there was dishonesty, all these things. And we had built a life together. And especially being a young woman, overseas, away from all her family and all her friends, it was earth-shattering when that relationship ended. And I essentially lost all my self-confidence, all of my self-esteem. It was like an identity loss. I had given so much to this person and to this relationship. And when that ended, I was completely disoriented. And slap a, world pandemic on top of that, I was literally on an island with no way to get off. I was in Australia, there was no planes flying. We couldn't leave our region. Everything was chaos. And it propelled me into this journey of self-discovery. I had a bit of a spiritual awakening, I guess you could say. And I had kind of lost all of my friend group at the time too. So I really was quite alone. Um, I remember having a moment where I went in to chat with a doctor because I had missed a bunch of days of work. I just kept calling in sick. And I was like, well, I guess I should get like a doctor's note that I've actually been sick. Went in, had a complete breakdown. It was a female doctor, which I was very grateful for. And I kind of poured my heart out to her. I told her everything that had happened. And she had said, you're depressed and have anxiety. And that was never something I thought I would ever hear in my life. I'm a very outgoing person. I'm a very social person. I'm, life of the party kind of person. Um, and when I heard that, it really hit me. It hit me like a wall. But one thing I kind of kept in my mind at the time was kind of knowing that, like, okay, so this is where I'm at right now, but this is not like who I am at my core. And that was one thing I really, really held in my heart where I was like, okay, so I'm depressed and I have anxiety, but I didn't before. So that means that I can make my way out of this. I can
It didn't
also,
define you in that moment. It was something you
no,
had, it wasn't something you were.
exactly. Yeah. And I knew I was going to overcome it. I had absolutely no idea how, but I knew that I would. And I reached out to the few acquaintances that I had at the time, one or two close girlfriends that I had at the time, and I really leaned on them for support. And there was one in particular, my good friend Anna, and she gave me a crystal necklace. It was a clear quartz, and she put it on and she said, "This is for clarity." And I put it on, and within 2 weeks, that relationship was officially over. Like, I finally got out of there. It dragged on for a lot longer than it should have. And then I kind of went, oh my God, this is magic, right? So then it kind of sent me on this whole journey of discovering all these different kind of healing modalities. Like I said, a spiritual awakening. I started to explore a lot of like woo-woo stuff, if I, I'll air quote woo-woo stuff. Um, and I really just, because I was quite alone in that place, I really just kind of embraced that journey. And I thought, okay, well, I'm a really small version of who I used to be, but I'm not going to stay here. And I don't know how, like I said, but I'm going to get out of this. So I tried everything. Threw all the spaghetti at the wall. Luckily, I was in a place, I was in Margaret River, Australia, it's like a small surf community. It's a wine region. There's a lot of, very eccentric people there. There's sound bowl meditations and yoga and yeah, static dance and all this kind of alternative stuff, Reiki healers and all this kind of stuff. And I really like immerse myself in all of that. And I got to, a year or two kind of on that journey, taking myself on dates and doing all this kind of solo stuff and just really rediscovering who I was. And I kind of got to the point then where, the world kind of started to open back up again and all that was kind of becoming a little bit more available to me. Um, but then I was actually at that point in my like legal citizenship journey, I was actually still a permanent resident, but I was then eligible for my citizenship. And I knew that was going to be a 1 year process to complete that process. So I kind of thought to myself, well, I've waited this long. Like what's one more year with everything going on in the world, everything that just happened? It would be foolish for me to leave and potentially lose this residency and this opportunity to ever come back to this country. I'm just going to stick it out for 1 more year. So then that kind of post breakup, that healing journey, that whole journey that I went on was around about 3 years. And I finally made it home back to Canada. And I was home at my family's camp on the lake where I grew up. And it's absolutely just soul food there for me. And I had a lot of time to reflect because I was now removed from this whole environment and this situation. I was away from my ex and all that stuff that was going on. And I kind of had a light bulb moment where I was like, what is it that I did in the last 3 years? And I don't even know exactly how it happened, but I kind of had this awareness around all of the lessons that I learned, all the work that I did, all of the practices that I was like trying along the way. And I kind of went, light bulb moment. What I did was I improved my emotional intelligence. But at the time, I didn't have that vocabulary. I didn't realize that that was what was happening. And I kind of grieved for myself a little bit because I just, it was a long, drawn out, hard, lonely journey. And that whole time I was just wishing and wanting and waiting for someone to just reach out their hand and be like, I see you. I've been through this and I'll show you the way out. And I longed for that so much. And I like I said, I had some really supportive friends and things along the way. But I was really seeking a guide. And I just didn't really have it. And so, 3 years later, I'm having this awareness and I'm kind of realizing these things. And it all just kind of came full circle. And that was the kind of moment where I realized this is my purpose. I need to be that outreached hand for someone else that's going through that journey.
I always
And
say,
maybe,
be the person you needed when you were struggling, and you are just exemplifying that.
yeah, exactly. And so that essentially was how the Emotions Untapped podcast was born. I was like, okay, well, I've learned a lot. And I know a lot about this stuff, but I know that there's a lot of other people out there that are experts on this and have years of experience and have, the PhDs and the scientific evidence and all these other things that like I didn't really have yet. It was like I know how I well, it was almost I didn't really know how I did it. I know that I did it. But I was almost there was a bit of a gap there. I was like, but what did I do? How did so I was still on my journey of like, I still want to learn about this stuff and I want to help others. So I felt like it was my duty to have conversations with people who this is their expertise, this is their profession, this is what they do for a living. Have those conversations, record those conversations, and share that with the world. Because if I had that when I was starting out on my journey, it may not have been so lonely. It may not have taken so long, and it may not have felt so hard.
Mm.
Although I will say that I'm very grateful for the fact that it took that long and it was that hard and it was that lonely because it made me who I am today. So that is why I'm here creating this show and creating this podcast for other people because I know it is needed in the world.
The burning question I think we all have on our minds at the moment is, did you get your Australian citizenship?
I did get my Australian
Well,
citizenship.
there
Yeah,
you go.
I'm a dual citizen. I've got two passports, and I'm very, very proud of that. Yes, yes.
Good for you. So let's talk about your podcast. It's called Emotions Untapped. And, who is it for? What's covered? What do you talk about? Who are your guests? Bring us through.
Absolutely. So this was actually like a little bit of a struggle, to be honest, in the beginning, narrowing down when we're in business and we're marketing and this and that. And it's very important to figure out, who are you speaking to? Who is your audience? And it was tricky for me because there's a big part of me that's like, well, emotional intelligence is for everyone. We're all human and we all have emotions. And so this is for everyone, anyone that wants to listen, but because of my journey and my experience and what I'm really, focused on continuing to learn, I think I've decided it is for, it's for leaders, it's for millennials, it's for, people that are kind of in that 25 to 45 age bracket that maybe are potentially, figuring out who they are, starting their own businesses, starting to have families. There are quite a few episodes that are geared towards, parents, step parents. Also, there's a really powerful episode geared towards like blended families because there's a lot of that going on these days, and that's a quite a tricky thing to navigate. Um, but in a roundabout way, it really is for anyone and everyone who's interested and passionate about personal development, about strengthening relationships, about being a leader in their workplace, raising emotionally aware and intelligent children. I think there's a big gap between kind of my generation that is now starting to raise kids and the generation before us that raised us. And there's no blame, there's no fault. They did their absolute best with what they had and what they were given. But I think the way that they parented their children, us, and the way that, this next generation of new parents is parenting their children is very different because of the society that we live in. We've got, the internet,
100%.
social media, right? There's all these other factors that didn't exist before. So it's really geared towards anyone and everyone who is discovering who they are and has children around them. Now, that's not to say like I myself don't have children, but I have, a baby niece and nephew. So there are children in my life. And it's important for even as aunties and uncles for us to be role models for these kids. So it's really geared towards the millennials, parents and non-parents, like I say, people who just have kids in their lives, but really people who are just wanting to enhance their life and really just develop themselves, develop their personal skills, and create an impact in the world and just do that in the best possible way that they can. We talk about all sorts of things. As I described earlier, emotional intelligence, that's quite a large umbrella. So we can really subcategorize that. And then we can subcategorize those subcategories as well. Like we can,
Certainly, yeah.
right?
So
There's a lot of
I was just going to say the generation that raised you is Gen X, which that's who I am. And I can tell you right now, we don't subscribe usually to the, emotional intelligence. We are tired. We have been
Mhm,
working since we were in utero, and we
mhm.
are done. Like and everything else. So it's time for your generation to pick up where we left off or whatever it is and carry it from there. And all the power to you, to be honest with you. When
Thank
the guests on your show, on your podcast, Emotions Untapped, who are they?
So, I mean, they're really a variety of people. They're men, they're women, they're of different, age demographics. But what I'm starting to find, I'm in my recording my second season now, is really every single person that I talk to is somebody that has had a personal experience that completely changed their life in a in a positive way. Like, they had their challenges, they had their struggles, but then they overcame that adversity
A
and they've
profound way.
learned, yeah, and in a
Hmm.
profound way. And they've learned so much on their journey that that has now become so important to them that they are now taking that experience and teaching others. For example, one of the first episodes that I released, I spoke to a woman, Suzanne Jabor. She's incredible. We talked about grief, grief as an emotion. Unfortunately, she lost her son at he was 22 years old, 3 a.m., call in the middle of the night, completely unexpected. And she essentially completely spiraled and grieved very loudly. And it sent her on this journey of curiosity, really, of, experiencing that grief and how we manage it and how other people manage it or support others or really a lack of. And now she's a grief counselor. She's now educated herself. And there's another woman that I'm talking to where we're talking more about the menstrual cycle and how that affects women specifically. But then the conversation is also about you know the male partners in a male female relationship. If they can understand the female cycle a little bit better, then they can better support their partners. We're talking about men's mental health. We're talking about, um, like I said, step parenting and blended families. Oh my goodness, like the list goes on. Like there's so many things. It's really there's guests from all kind of backgrounds and facets and of either professional or personal experience. And they all bring something really, really unique to the table, but the conversation is always centered around, you know, understanding, processing our emotions, and just really coming back to, a safe space in the body and, that regulated place in the nervous system. So
Hmm.
there's a real variety, but of course there's the running theme through it all too.
Speaking of what we bring to the table, let's hear a real world example from your journey about how you sort of came into your own or started an understanding about your emotional intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share this actually because it was very intense at the time and it transitioned very beautifully. So obviously my experience that I shared earlier of, in 2015, I went to Australia. I was there for 8.5 years. I moved back last August, so I've been back in Canada now for about a year. My relationship with my mother was a very interesting relationship to navigate, having essentially left at 17 years old when I went off to college, never really living with my folks again before I went on my journey to Australia, and then now coming back and living with my parents at the age of 29, 30. I came back in 2022 for a visit, and that's when all this kind of happened. I've moved back now in 2023, but in 2022 I came back for 6 months. And it was a really interesting experience, living again with my mother because she's very set in her ways. She's very loving. She's very kind. She will, do anything for anyone. Um, but it was too much. It was almost as if, I left when I was 17. So it was like pluck me out at 17 and pluck me back in when I'm like 30 and have had all this life experience and this, all this relationship stuff and hitting my rock bottom and then getting myself out of that hole. Like I did all that on my own. So of course, I'm not the same person that I was when I was, prior to me leaving. And the relationship was very interesting. It was very much her going back into the role of mothering a 17-year-old little rebel who didn't follow the rules and was really, I was a tough kid to raise, I feel. So she very much went back into that role. And it was very interesting noticing my own reaction to that. It kind of caused me to also almost step back into that space where I was raising my voice, reacting, talking back, not being, not really liking being told what to do. Like it was almost her going back to mothering that 17-year-old girl sent me back into being that 17-year-old girl. And it was really hard to navigate at first because I'm trying to calmly communicate and speak to her and be like, Mom, like, I've grown up. Like, I don't need to be told what to do or how to do it. And it was really triggering for me. And I tried my best to have a lot of like empathy and compassion for where she was coming from, because I understood that that would have been, it's just natural for her to like go back into that role, right? So unfortunately, because I was so far away for so long, we didn't have time for our relationship to evolve. I feel like this could be, very relatable to anyone who, is raising children, and suddenly, your children go from children to now they're adults. Like that, you don't treat, your 25-year-old son or daughter the same way you treated your 10-year-old son or daughter. Like the relationship evolves through time. And we kind of didn't have that time and space for that evolution to happen. So suddenly I'm back, and the dynamic was just, it was very intense. Um, but I used my tools, and I tried to have that empathy and compassion and speak to her very kindly and reiterate that I understand that this is, why this is happening, that we kind of missed this decade basically of time together. Um, and the conversations that we had were a little bit tricky at the beginning, but I stood firm in those boundaries, and I kind of held my own, and I really stood for who I was and what I believed in. And like I said, very compassionately and empathetically spoke to her and tried to express where I was coming from, while simultaneously letting her know that I understood where she was coming from. And there was no light bulb moment, but it kind of eventually, transitioned and became a little bit more of a, equal understanding. Like, okay, now we're going to treat each other like adults. So I was there for the 6 months in 2022. And then, not knowing at the time I'd be moving back like a year later, when I did move back a year later, completely different situation. I think all of the things that I said, even though it seemed like she didn't necessarily receive it at the time, she obviously had that kind of year of absorbing it and processing it. And then when
Reflection.
yeah, and then when I actually moved home, it was a completely different experience. And I felt as though she got it kind of. And
I
we
think
were
some, I was just saying, I think sometimes what happens with parents is, you know, you act like a child, we treat you like a child. You act like an adult, we'll treat you like an adult. And I think in that time that you spent together, she started to see, okay, I can trust Livia to do the right thing, or I'm done raising her because she'll take the torch from here. And I think maybe your mom just needed you to demonstrate that. And it looks like you did. So she was able to say, I can put it down now. And she's got it from here, which is good.
Yeah. And it was that time aspect
Yeah.
too, right? Because of all that time away. And like you said, she just needed to see it a little bit. Like
Hmm.
I could stand there and I could explain it to her and I could talk, but like that wasn't really enough. She needed to see it. And then she eventually
100%.
did. And then, now I've been thankfully I've actually so grateful that I've been able to, stay with them and kind of get back on my own 2 feet. And
Sure.
I've been doing that. And our relationship is so great. It's
That's
so
good to hear.
fantastic. So I'm really grateful for all of the tools and all the things I learned and all the experience that I had while being away, that I was able to come and level the playing field kind of, and reach, a
Your mom
place.
has learned from you now. So which is a good thing. Talk to us about your website. Your website is eqnation.org. What are people going to find there?
Yep. So I've got all the podcast episodes linked on the website. There's an about page, of course, so you can go and have a little bit of a closer look about me and my journey. I've got a couple of freebies on there as well. 7 steps to elevating your EQ. So that's just a really, really neat, tidy little ebook for people who are just kind of getting started on this journey and just need those foundational blocks to kind of get started. What are the things that I can kind of start doing now to start to develop more self-awareness? We've got resource links as well. So all of the people that I talk to on the show and in the podcast also have their own offers, their own memberships, their own freebies, whether it be directly about grief or self-trust or, all these different topics that we're talking about. A huge part of my show is, creating a stage for people to come and share their expertise. And if people need what they have to offer, then I encourage that they go and seek that. So I also have an entire resource section. There's a really cool lady that I spoke to as well that wrote a book about it's called Your Heart's Voice, and it's an entire book about intuition and listening to your intuition. And her mission is to get that in schools because there's a lack of teaching about emotional intelligence in school. So it's a really great resource for teachers. So all that kind of stuff is on there, all of the resources that are talked
Mm-hmm.
about in the show, and then the membership as well. So that's a space for people to come in and actually have a live kind of group Q&A session with the guests that we have on the show. That's the main focus of the membership. Um, because I think it's really neat for people to have the opportunity to, of course, hear these conversations, but it's also very important for people to be able to ask their own questions because
To
everyone's
participate. You know what I mean?
right.
You can be an observer and you absorb so much, but when you're participating in something, that's a whole different level of learning, certainly.
Yes. And everyone
Absolutely.
has their own, you know, personal situation that's going on that, someone might be grieving the loss of, a particular person. Someone over here might be supporting someone else in grieving their loss. So it's really important for me to have a space where people can come and get their questions answered. I try to do my best to ask questions to the guests on the show that are going to serve the audience in the best way possible. But of course,
Sure.
everyone's situation is unique. So that space where people can come and continue the conversation.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the website.
What's a common misconception about what you do, as you're serving people through the podcast, or just about emotional, intelligence itself?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is that, healing in general, and I think there's a lot of through what we see on social media and stuff, I feel like, unfortunately, like the healing journey, and I'm air quoting that, it's a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It's glorified almost a little bit.
Martyr
And
syndrome,
yeah, yeah.
possibly?
Yeah. And so I feel like it's important to just know and realize and understand that like once you kind of start out on this journey, once you kind of open your heart, your mind, and your soul up to, hey, these are the parts of me that I know aren't necessarily serving me. I'd like to work on these and really, start on that healing journey. It doesn't end. Like you're not suddenly healed one day. You don't like, read the ebook and do the course and do the
Hmm.
thing and then, oh, I'm good now. I'm all good. No. It's a little bit like opening a can of worms, but sometimes the worms can be really delicious and it really is it really is all
I'm not
about
going
the
to your house for dinner ever, Livia. That's all I know. It's maybe peeling back the onion. I could talk, that's palatable. But as you're correct. As you start to go down the journey, you may go in one direction, but then you realize, it branches off into several. And it's a work in progress. And I think that we all need to sort of recognize that.
Yeah, exactly. And just like having grace with that too, right? Having that grace with
Certainly.
yourself that, it's hard. Like facing our shadows and doing this inner work, it's hard and it's
Mm,
uncomfortable. Like it's not, filters and all this glorified, like whatever we see on social media. Like it sucks. Like it
mm,
sucks to be in it. But what you get on the other side though is
it's worth it.
yeah, there's no words for it
Mm.
really. It's your higher self. It's totally worth it. It's elevating yourself to be like the best possible version that you can be in this human life.
Your best
We're
you.
your best you. Yeah, I mean, we're here for a short time and I once heard a coach of mine, she described this and it was very powerful for me at the time. And she said, there's this idea that when you kind of get to the end of the road, that you're faced with, perhaps like a spirit or, people talk about, in religion, get to the white pearly gates and this and
Mm,
that, some sort of version of that. You kind of get to the end and, what she said was supposedly, you get a glimpse of like what your life could have been if you filled your full potential in your human existence. And what she said was, I'll be damned if I get there and I see that and it wasn't my reality,
mm.
So it's like, why not? Like,
Live your life.
just live it and feel all the things and, do the best that you can and care about people and
Mm.
make a difference. Like, pour your heart into something that lights you up. Don't just, go to a job every day just to pay the bills. Like, go out in the world and experience people, make connections, like make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Take the crappy stuff that happens to you and learn from it and turn it into something beautiful because otherwise, what are you doing? What are you here for?
Why not?
What's the point? Yeah.
That dovetails into, Livia, what is your Monty? As you know, Monty is our mascot here at Belmont City Press, and he's sort of that, beacon of all things inspirational or maybe a little lesson learned or a mantra that we carry with us. So, what is your Monty?
My Monty is
Mm,
be about it.
explain.
Whatever, yeah, whatever it is that you're thinking or feeling or working on or creating, be about it. We can kind of break that down in so many ways. Be present with where you're at when you're with people. Be present in that space. Be present with that conversation. If you're working towards your goals, if you're building your dreams, go hard. Like, be about it. Like, make your whole existence about that thing, whatever you're doing, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, just be about it fully and completely. Just like surrender yourself to that thing because that is just, I think, how you get the most out of life and the most out of every single experience that you have, that you get the privilege to have.
So you just commit and go for it.
Yeah, yeah, like 2 feet in, and I'm a big believer in, try everything. Like, how do you know what you like to do? You got to go try things. You got to kind of figure out what you don't like in order to kind of redirect yourself towards what you do. So try
Absolutely.
everything, get outside your comfort zone. Don't be afraid. Try things. Be about it. If an opportunity comes your way, and it
Give it a
might be
try.
scary. Yeah, give it a try. Say yes. It might be scary. It might be unknown, but like, guess what? Oh my God, you're going to learn so much from that. So just be about it.
Speaking of choices and saying yes, are you ready for our rapid fire session?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right, I'm going
excited
to
about
give you
this.
two choices, and you tell
Okay,
me which one speaks to you. We'll get to know the Livia behind the Livia and who
great.
you are. Now, some of these, there is only one right answer. I'm just letting you know, and I'll let you
No
know.
pressure.
Nope, no pressure at all. Would you rather travel by train or car?
Can I only say one? Can I only just say the one thing? It really depends where I am, but I'll say car. I'll say car.
Okay, you'd rather go on a road trip than like pack up and get on a train and go cross country.
Yeah, but it depends like where it is though. You know what I mean? Like if the train is going through some magical like and the only way to see it is by rail, then yeah, I'm taking the train.
Okay, all right. Movie or book?
Book.
Yeah. Chocolate or vanilla? Only one right answer.
Vanilla. I'm a vanilla
Really?
girl.
No, that's not
Yeah.
right. I tell the story all the time. When I was younger, my sister got like an ice cream making kit or something like that,
Mhm.
made vanilla ice cream or poison. I'm not exactly sure which. I ate it and now I cannot eat vanilla ice
Oh
cream, especially.
no.
So that I'm sorry to tell you is wrong. Would you rather look at a city skyline or a countryside view?
Oh, country by far.
All
Yep.
right. Card game or board game?
Card games.
Yes,
Love card
absolutely.
games.
I hate board games.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd like to just
Especially Monopoly.
I flip
I'm
the
like a
table.
no
I don't, it's,
Monopoly.
you know what I can't stand is life, the game of life.
Oh,
Well, like you
yeah.
make all of these plans, you make all the good decisions and everything else. Next thing you know, you're like, poof, no, you have no income and you have 7 kids. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I get so mad at that game. Would you rather go to a museum or a gallery?
A gallery, I
Would you
think.
rather eat
Yeah.
breakfast or dinner? You can
Oh,
eat breakfast
breakfast.
for, yeah, you can eat breakfast for dinner, but you can't
Yeah,
only, you
breakfast.
can, yeah, no. Breakfast is like
Breakfast.
the only 3 times a day meal that is
Yeah.
acceptable,
Breakfast
honestly.
for dinner for sure. Although I will say I do love leftover fried spaghetti for breakfast. That's a good one.
Fried spaghetti I've never had in my entire
Like in
life.
a pan, like you just put the leftovers in a pan and like put a bunch of Parmesan cheese and just like warm it up in the pan. Oh
Isn't
my
that
God.
just called heating it back up?
Yeah, but
Am
I
I
just
missing something?
I just fry it in a pan and it's just I don't know. It's so much better than like warming it up in the microwave.
All right, one more. Concert or theater?
Concert.
Concert. Okay.
Love the
Oh,
energy.
yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
All right. We have a guest to guest question. So the guest before you left behind a question for you to answer during our show. Are you ready for our guest to guest question for you?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. How do you stay ahead of trends in your industry or in, sort of what you do and teach to people and talk about?
Great question. I feel like I've kind of got a two-part answer to this one. First part, I don't. I don't pay
Mm-hmm.
attention.
Okay. All right.
I maybe that's the wrong thing to be doing, but I am just kind of again starting out and I'm not really focused on what other people are doing. I'm trying to stay in my lane. I'm trying to find quality people and have quality conversations and produce a really great sounding show and also engage with people and find out what they need and figure out a way to give that to them. I'm not really looking at other people that are out there, um, specifically like say in the emotional health
Mm-hmm.
realm. I don't look at those people as competition. I would rather collaborate with them because I think we all have a similar mission. And I feel very strongly about, just supporting other entrepreneurs, other leaders, other go-getters. There's enough pie out there for all of us.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes,
All right.
exactly. I love that
What's
quote.
number two? That was number one. Number two?
Yeah, so the other thing is AI. I was very resistant to that for quite a while because I was like, you know, I'm me and I want to share who I am and my energy and I don't want some fake, someone else writing the copy or someone else, curating these ideas. However, when it comes to podcasting, there's a lot of work that goes involved. As you know, there's a lot of work that's
I have no
involved in
idea
this.
what you're talking about. Absolutely none.
And when you're not yet at that point in your journey where you have a team of people to help you, it's a lot of work. And I've started to utilize AI specifically to take, my long form content and put it into short form, like make reels out of it and support me kind of in that journey, as well as scheduling and this and that. So I'm trying to start to explore,
And
these AI
embrace,
tools, embrace these
explore and
AI.
embrace.
Yeah. I'm not, I don't let it do everything for me. I don't want to fully, utilize that, but I am trying to, I guess, stay on the bandwagon. I guess it's not even a matter of getting ahead of the trends, but kind of just keeping up.
Catching up. Well, for
Catching
someone
up.
who does something that is so deep and personal, to introduce something that is artificially intelligent where you're more authentic, I can definitely see, where your struggle may be.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
one more time, what is your website and your social media handles, which we'll put links to in the show notes, but let us know what they are.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at emotions.untapped, and it's all of the podcast stuff on there. We have eqnation.org, which is the main headquarters for the podcast, all of our offers, our membership, etc., all of that. And then I kind of have like Livia Lowder on Instagram as well, at Livia Lowder, which I'm not super active on at the moment because I'm focusing mostly on the podcast, but that is more like my personal page.
Mm-hmm. If I gave you 60 seconds to tell us a story, what would the world learn from you? Rendered
I think,
speechless.
yeah, speechless. There's so many things like running through my mind. So
Sure.
to narrow it down,
Pick
this is
one.
actually something, I actually thought of this the other day. And it's just that emotions can be our biggest teacher if we're willing to learn and be the student. I think, back to your question about, misconception. I used to feel when I was, really in it, like really in my kind of dark days that I described to you earlier, it was, I felt very much like my emotions were in control of me and that they
Mm-hmm.
were more of me than the me was me, if that makes sense. I feel like anyone
Certainly.
that maybe was in that space could understand and relate to that. And I was fighting them. I was like, I don't want to feel so much all the time. And I would just really desire for these emotions to be less intense.
Mm.
However, on that journey, it became very apparent to me that this is the learning, this is the experience. And so if we can start to understand that when we do feel things, especially things that are not the most comfortable, like anger, shame, even, abandonment, rejection, all of these things, there's a lesson there that when we feel those things, the universe is trying to teach us something. Our higher self, our soul is trying to show us a path. Our emotions can be our guide. And I think a lot of us just, need someone to perhaps help them or to guide them to understanding that your emotional compass, it may just need a bit of a recalibration. And it's a really important lesson to learn that our emotions can be our biggest teacher, but it's just knowing and understanding how we can feel and experience those emotions and take the lessons from that.
Emotions Untapped, the podcast. Livia, I appreciate your time. It's extremely valuable, and I hope I honored that here today.
It's been an incredible opportunity to sit and chat with you. Thank you for asking such incredible questions, and I'm really grateful that I've had this opportunity to share. Thank you so much for holding space.
Thank you. To our listeners, if you have a story to share, visit tellasastorypodcast.com. If you're an aspiring author, a seasoned business owner, or looking to elevate your personal brand, visit belmontcitypress.com for expert advice on writing your own success story. Trust the next chapter because you are the author. Now, tell us a story.